If you've ever been told to keep your head down and let your work speak for itself, this episode is for you. Because in today's fast-moving, AI-driven world, staying quiet can cost you influence, opportunity, and fulfillment. And if you lead a team, it's just as critical because your best ideas and your people's best ideas can only flourish in a culture where it's safe to speak up. My guest, Neelu Kaur, is an executive coach, speaker, and author who helps professionals find their voice and their leaders create environments where innovation thrives. In this episode, you'll gain the ability to advocate for yourself with confidence, help your team share their best ideas, and stand out by leading with the one thing AI can't replace: your authentic human uniqueness. Welcome to the No Limits Leadership Podcast. We discuss ancient wisdom, real-world experiences, and the latest concepts on mastering leadership of self and others. If you're committed to maximizing your life and your impact on the world, you're home. Welcome to the No Limit Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Sean Patton, and I'm very excited to have our guest today, Neelu Kaur. She's a leadership and mindfulness consultant, keynote speaker, and author who focuses on the intersection of emotional intelligence, culture, and communication. With over 20 years of experience working with Fortune 500 companies, Neelu blends Eastern philosophy and Western business strategy to help leaders create inclusive, high-performing cultures rooted in self-awareness and authenticity. She's also the author of Be Your Own Cheerleader and, like I mentioned earlier, an amazing keynote speaker. We met at a speaker training program, and we hit it off immediately. I knew we had to get you on the podcast, and I love the content you put out into the world. It's just high quality and authentic. So I can't wait for our conversation today.
Thank you so much. I know it's been a long time coming, so I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you talk a lot about self-advocacy, and we talk a lot about leaders and not just and leaders of organizations. And a lot of people assume that means, in a hierarchy at a higher position. Not how I define leadership, probably not how you do. I think we are all leaders. But we talk self-advocacy, sometimes it's easy, right? If you're on the top of the task org to step in and say things and advocate for yourself and almost expected to do that. But one of the things I love about what you talk about is self-advocacy for everyone. So what does self-advocacy look like for rising leaders or new leaders or individual contributors in an organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think given the world we live in, I used to think I was actually told throughout my life that, keep your head down, do good work, and your work will speak for itself. And that is a recipe for disaster in corporate America. And I learned it the hard way. I have been downsized and fired so many times that I've lost count. And it's not because I'm not smart or that I don't have these innovative, creative ideas. It was truly because I did not know how to be my own cheerleader and how to advocate for those ideas. So I think for anyone in any part of any organization, and I agree with what you said, Sean, it's not just about leadership as a C-suite. It's leadership. You could be a leader in your church. You could be the leader of your family. Like there's so many different ways we can think about leadership, but the idea for every single human is to advocate for what they believe in and their ideas, and so that they're not overlooked.
Yeah, 100%. And so if we got real tactical and someone says, yes, you're right, I need to self-advocate because I need to, demonstrate value and I want to contribute and I have these important things to say. What does that look like from a tactical sense? Or maybe what's easier is let's start with why don't people self-advocate? Like, why is it a problem?
I was just going to say, I would say, let's slam on the brakes there. Before we jump into skills, let's talk about why it's challenging. Because I think when we sort of talk openly about why it's challenging, it takes away like that finger pointing or the self-criticism and the critical voice and the imposter monster that we all have. So some of the reasons that self-advocacy can be so challenging is cultural conditioning. Maybe you were raised in a small town of even the US, and it's like, be humble. Don't talk about yourself. Don't brag. We live in this small town. We can't, just stay under the radar. You could be from the US and have this experience. You could be from the military, and it's all about the we. It's about the team. It's about the group. And so when you advocate for yourself, you feel like you're betraying your team or group, right? So it could be a military background. You could come from a collective culture. For example, India, there's certain Asian cultures that are very collective and they're very we-based, group-based, all about group harmony. And North America is very I-based. So some of these collective cultures are Asian cultures, African cultures, Arab cultures, Latin cultures, and these cultures really pride themselves on the group. And so when you stick out too much from the group, it's not a good thing in collective cultures. And so when you raise that way, when you come into the corporate space, you just think, yeah, I'm just going to do good work, and I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to do anything that's going to cause any issues. I'm just going to do what I'm told, and then you're overlooked for promotions, for raises, because you didn't raise your hand and say, hey, no, that was actually my idea. It's because it feels uncomfortable. It feels viscerally uncomfortable to do that. You could
So
even be extremely introverted. Like, that's another thing a lot of people say is, I'm very introverted. I don't feel like tooting my own horn. I get that a lot from technologists. You could be neurodivergent, where again, you were just, you spent your whole life sort of like trying to stay under the radar because you didn't want to highlight that you think differently or you process information differently. And so these are all reasons why self-advocacy can be challenging.
Right. So I'm hearing from you is that it's a belief structure that could come from a myriad of experiences, and some could be very individual and could be more of a group cultural experience. I'm reminded of, I was in a training program with a bunch of coaches this weekend. We were talking about a little before we started, and there was a really powerful story that one of the guys talked about some of his limiting beliefs. And, he's an American, white guy in his 50s, but talking about how his parents come from that sort of like silent generation, boomer generation, right? Where kids are meant to be seen and not heard. And he is like a very outgoing, high energy guy. Like, everyone loved to be around him. Like, so he had so much to give.
Right.
And he talked about, and he started tearing up when he talked about it, how because he had that energy and wanted to talk, that when they ate family dinners, his dad put his own table in the laundry room and he had to eat by himself away from the family because he talked too much at dinner. So like, that's something where you wouldn't naturally look at him and the way he is and say he might struggle with self-advocacy because of this very sort of like open, he comes from this like very unique culture or whatever. But to him, his own background and experience made self-advocacy seem like a challenge for him because of his upbringing.
That's so, I feel bad that he had to experience that.
Yeah. It was a very powerful story. And you talk about that work, the work and the power of self-advocacy. I think it was just an example I wanted to bring up to show people that to not take it for granted or not take things at face value of like why something's happened, or someone is this certain way, it looks a certain way, is from a certain background, is of a certain age, is whatever. There could be something there, or there could be something you have no idea. You mentioned the small town thing. There could be something you don't even know about.
Exactly. And you wouldn't know until you dig a little deeper. And I think that is the onus on all leaders of organizations, of teams. It's like to really get to know people and for people to feel safe to share some of their struggles. Because I think we pride speed and efficiency, and we're just like, no, let's get to this meeting, do this, come out with these action items. And a lot of people don't process information that quickly. And so they need a little time. And so that's one of the areas that I really work with leaders on, is like, how do you create these buckets of time throughout the day where people can come to you because they didn't have that amazing thought in the meeting, but you have to create that space so they do feel safe to come to you and say, I was thinking about what happened in the meeting. I just didn't have the solution then.
Oh, I love that. Tell me more about the buckets.
Sorry, there's something just popped up on my screen. The bucket, like in the sense of time buckets.
Yeah. You talk about creating buckets of time or opportunity for people to come to you as a leader. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I borrowed this concept from, I don't know if you're familiar with Priya Parker. She's the author of The Art of Gathering. And she talks about how we have to do something called generous exclusion when it comes to the gathering. And in this case, gatherings are meetings, right? And it's like, who are you allowing in the room for the betterment of the group? And who are you disallowing? Because there doesn't need to be 15 people in a group. Because if you have 15 people, you're probably not going to reach to consensus anyways. And those folks that aren't the loudest in the room, they're going to feel unsafe to speak up. So it's like, who are you intentionally inviting into the space of 30 minutes for this meeting? And what is the desired outcome? And what will you do if there are people in that space that don't have those quick, or who aren't so quick on their feet? Maybe they're going through something personally. Maybe they're just have more processing time that is required. But it's like, how are you as a leader allowing everyone to have those innovative, creative ideas? Because that's what we need in this day and age of constant innovation, constant speed and efficiency. But I think we have to slow down to speed up.
I love that. And what came up for me when you just said that was how important it is for leaders to get to know their people individually, so they actually build that awareness. And I might know, you might be the CEO, hey, I know talking with Sean, doing my one-to-ones, like because I'm like leading at a personal whole person level, not transactionally, that I know Sean might need a second to, to speak up or to process something, or I might need to give him the space to say, hey, Sean, you took a bunch of notes when we were talking about that thing 10 minutes ago, and now I'm wondering if anything came up for you there, right? Like
Right.
really like that not just treating, but that takes a leader, to your point, spending intentional time getting to know each individual person so they can get the best out of each person.
Yeah, and I don't know if you know Marcus Buckingham's work with Strength Finders, but he really talks about, and this has sort of changed the way I work with people and work with myself as well, is he talks about strengths as things that energize you and weaknesses, that activities that deplete you. So you could actually be really good at a weakness. If you're on a team and you keep doing something really well, the assumption is made, hey, Sean loves to do this. But meanwhile, Sean feels like he got hit by a bus every time he does it. So it's like, should Sean be doing that task? Probably not. Sean should be doing a task that lights him up. And that when he's lit up in that way, he's going to produce amazing ideas and be very creative. Sometimes we just have to shuffle things around. There's some people that love being on Excel. I am not one of them. And I could be good at it, I guess, good enough, but it really drains the life out of me, right? And so that's why I have a bookkeeper. That's why I have an accountant. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, there are all these things that you just have to understand, like, hey, this is something that completely drains me. And so what am I going to do? How can I shift this? And I know as solopreneurs and entrepreneurs, we have a little bit more freedom. Like, we can hire people and do these things. And if you're on a team, it's about articulating that, right? Like, I'm taking on this task and I'm really good at it, but it's not fulfilling. And one of the other things that Marcus talks about is that it can't be 100% of things that fulfill you because there's this price of admission. You have your health insurance, you have all of these things, you have a consistent paycheck. So his formula is 70% things that energize you and 30% things that maybe don't energize you, that we just kind of have to do. And so you check in with yourself. Say, hey, am I at close to 70 or am I at like 50? And if so, what can I speak to with my manager and take on and offload some of these things? And maybe there's someone else on the team that loves to do this. So it's a two-way communication. It's not just the leader's responsibility. It's also the IC's responsibility to share that information.
So what I'm hearing from you is the leaders need to give, one, educate and give space on this so people understand that and sort of make it a cultural expectation. But then also, once they give space for it, individuals needing to make time to do some self-awareness, some check-ins on what am I doing that's giving me energy, what isn't, what do I want to do more of, what do I do less of. And I mean, that sounds like very fruitful ground for great one-to-ones.
We are, again, it's all about speed and efficiency. And so sometimes you're like, oh, I coach a lot of people at Google, and I know for sure, like, their minutes, like, they try to not have 30-minute meetings. They'll do 20 minutes, and they don't do hour meetings. They do 50 minutes. And it's like, I know a lot of tech companies, they want some downtime, some processing time, and it doesn't work. You're still back to back. It's like, you have to figure out a structure, a system that works for your organization. Every team could be different, even under the same organization. Every team operates differently. Every team has its own culture.
Yeah. No, that's really true. I see that with different clients. You'll see a different cadence with the IT department versus the marketing department, or engineers versus healthcare workers or whatever. And it's interesting. I always say that for every mission there's an optimal culture, right? So as the mission changes, then there's an optimal culture for that. So something like a marketing or graphic design or creative space, like those meetings or optimal culture probably looks different than if you're engineering a jet engine.
Right.
And so it's kind of our idea to figure out how this fits into that space of what does that ultimate culture look like. But on the self-advocacy piece, it sounds like regardless of that, space needs to be made and awareness needs to be made on getting everyone's input or space to give input.
Yes, I absolutely think that. And I think that is the onus of leadership team and leaders of teams and groups and organizations. It's like the onus is on you to make sure that you're an inclusive leader. There are people who are in your room who have those brilliant, bright ideas, but either they're being talked over, the meeting's too quick, there's a quick, rush because there's another meeting right after the meeting you're in. And so everything's all about speed, and speed does not mean innovation.
Yeah, I love that quote. Sometimes we do think, right, that it's just like move fast and break things, but sometimes that is not the best way to move forward. Um, what what are some, we're talking about how to, this important to create this stuff. And of course, the first step is awareness. And we just talked through some of that. But like, what are some practical things leaders can do to make their teams feel safe in sharing their ideas or feedback?
I think the first, like we were talking about the generous exclusion, like who is in your meeting, like being very intentional about who needs to be in this meeting for X output. Like if it's to make key decisions, who needs to be in the room for that key decision? And I think when we are very intentional, it helps us like not over invite people. It helps us make sure that the people in the room need to be in the room so their time is being used properly, right? It's all about time management. And I think when we have too many cooks in the kitchen, it's not gonna help anyone. So I think generous exclusion when it comes to meetings is definitely something everyone can start to think about and do. And again, that comes from Priya Parker. I want to make sure I give credit where credit is due. The second thing I think is really important is like communicating that people can come to you after the meeting or creating some office hours or something where it's not as structured, it's not as time bound. And so those people that are deep thinkers, or maybe they need to go back to their desk and like draw through different flow charts and like however you process information and then come back to the room or that person and say, no, actually, I think this is the way I want us to think about it. And I think processing time is something we've just moved further and further away from.
Yeah, I really resonate with that. Have you worked with particular companies or organizations where you see this done well? That you maybe give an example?
I think that the intention might be there, but then what happens is all things happen like, oh, now everything's about AI, everything's about speed, everything's about, right? Like and so then we get caught up in these trends. And so now everyone, like I know the people that I coach at Google are on, like they are a marathon running towards X product launch and doing this. And they have different AI things. I mean, they have so much going on. And so it's like everything is about speed. And so I think that maybe the intention is there, but things happen in the environment that make us like react to that. So it's a balance between being intentional and reactive. And I think no one has the perfect formula for that. I really don't believe I don't believe any organization has the perfect formula figured out because there's so many external variables, right? But we can be intentional and just take it as it comes.
Yeah, I could totally see that. And it is tough in today's world where everyone just wants to move faster and do more with less. And, I think there's some really, first of all, I want to call it the office hours idea or scheduled time. I think that's something that I've seen also be super impactful because the other thing that I've seen happen a bit is leaders or people in the organization sort of like getting, their time or whatever getting interrupted by little asks and little calls and little things all the time. Yeah. And if you say, look, if it's not an emergency, like from, 3 to 4, or if, like people know there's a space to do that, they can also like save and think on those things. And we've all been there where it's like, we have an immediate, like, oh, go ask this person. And then if we wait a day or if we wait 5 hours, we actually probably figured it out.
Yeah.
Like we probably really need to go.
Exactly. But I think to your point, those office hours, even if no one shows up, just put your phone down. We all are constantly context switching. And I think the phone and devices near us doesn't help. And so even for you as a leader, like you need time to process and come up with different ways you want to do things. And so we just need to have more device-free time throughout the day.
I like that because that's something that, again, we have sort of the luxury being entrepreneurs, right? To kind of be in charge of what we do in our time, of have device-free time. It's a real scenario that has played out, I don't know, a couple times a month where I'm in my office working and I'll be like, oh, I need to make this like LinkedIn post or I need to check on this thing on social or whatever. And then all of a sudden it's 10 minutes later and I'm like still on the thing. And I'm like, El Diablo. And I like run to the other room and just like throw my phone in the bedroom. I'm like, get it away from me. Like it got me, like it stole my time when I didn't need it to.
You're lucky if it's only 10 minutes. I go down a rabbit hole and I could be there 45 minutes. I'm like, I could have used that time for something so much better.
Yeah. The algorithms are getting good. They're getting good at stealing our attention and time.
Yes.
So that's a very good call out. I feel like we brought up a few really good, tactics and strategies for leaders running meetings. I love the meeting exclusion part. I mean, so much. It's just like, all right, we're having this meeting, throw every manager that's available at this thing when they don't actually need to be there. So I think that's huge. And you brought up the office hours and things like that. Being aware of our people. So a lot of great tactical and strategic things to think of when it comes to leaders and managers. One thing I want to go back to, I guess, that we sort of missed was that individual contributor or that rising leader who maybe is in a meeting and is feeling like they're not being given the space for self-advocacy.
Mhm.
What advice do you give them?
Going back to challenges, why it's so challenging for certain people. So if it's part of your being that this is something that doesn't come natural to you and work feels like more high stakes, I would say practice in low stakes situation. Practice with your family, with your friends. Like I used to be the type of person, like if I was invited to a group lunch or dinner and someone would say, hey, what do you want to eat? I'd be like, oh, whatever you guys decide, it's totally fine. Even if I didn't want it, I would just go with, because I didn't want to rock the boat. That's how I was raised. As a woman, as an Indian woman, you just don't rock the boat. Like just do what everyone else is doing. So I have practiced even speaking up in those situations, which are not high stakes. And even with my husband, if he's like, hey, let's have Thai, I'm like, well, actually, I feel like pizza tonight. And to me, I'm like, yay, Neelu, in the background, in my head, because I know it sounds so silly. And he knows that I struggle with this. And so he's like, great, thanks. I actually appreciate you giving me input because I find myself going back to that natural, comfortable pattern of, oh, it's fine. Everything's fine. I'll just do it. I'll just do it. So I don't like upset him or upset my family and I think when we practice in places where it's safer, then it's like a muscle that we're flexing. So then when you're the loudest voice in the room is talking, you will have more of courage to speak up. But also there's some things or some words that you can use to come back into the conversation. I call them interruption shields. They're like words or phrases that we use to gracefully come back into conversation. So we use them all the time and maybe we're not aware of them. So some of them are like, actually, I'd like to pause here and interject, or I have a thought here, or let's circle back to this, right? Like these are words or phrases we use. And I think it's really important to just consistently use those words or phrases because it is like a muscle. We have to flex.
That is great. Great advice. And I love the idea of starting in low stakes and like continuing to work those muscles. What would you say? I mean, you obviously wrote, Be Your Own Cheerleader, because this is something you've been working on. It's been a struggle in your life. For you writing that book and going through that process, what has been, in your mind, the biggest transformation for you in the process of doing the research, writing the book, and sort of codifying these ideas that you had seen for you personally?
I think, when we have knowledge or awareness, it's power. And so now if I choose to just go along with the group, I'm aware of what I'm doing. And it's not like, it's getting out of that sort of like victim mentality. It's like, okay, no, I just want to do this because I'm aware that I'm doing this. But I think the awareness is the biggest transformation that for any of us, right? It's just knowing what we're doing in the moment so that there's no residual, what's the word I'm looking for? There's no residual, I can't think of the word. But
like resentment kind of?
Yeah, resentment. That was the word I was looking for. Yeah.
I got you.
Yeah, you got it. We were there. Yeah. So there's no resentment, right? Because you're aware of what you're doing. And I think that's the thing, right? Like once you have awareness, it's like, okay, I am going along with the group, but I'm choosing that. I'm actively choosing that. And I'm not doing that because it's habit or it's comfortable. I'm doing it because I'm choosing to do it.
It's interesting. And I guess it makes total sense now, but maybe for the first time with this topic, as much as I've taken your content and thought about it, it really is a mindfulness exercise.
Yes, absolutely. It's all about awareness.
Being able to separate yourself from that sort of default pattern and taking ownership and agency over
and
those
it's
decisions.
Stepping into more of an observer role of like, I'm watching myself do this and hey, it's okay. You're aware of what you're doing. So it's fine to just go along with the group. Because I have to turn on a switch on and off based on who I'm interacting with. Like if I'm interacting with family, I just have to switch to a we mindset. There's no I. And if I'm with my family, it's like, I don't have a voice when it comes to dinner. It's like it's family style. What do you mean? You don't want, you can't eat one thing on your own. You know what I mean? Like all of these things. So it's a switch. And I often tell people it's like a dial and a speedometer, right? Like there's an I dial and there's a dial and there's I part and we. And based on who's in front of you, you adjust the dial. You're still authentic to who you are, but you're just adjusting and your language would change too, right? So if you're in a performance review conversation, you have to turn up the I. This is your opportunity to turn up the I. So you want to talk about yourself, your achievements, your accomplishments, all of those things. But if you're in a brainstorm or a group huddle, that's when you're turning up the we and you're saying our shared outcomes, our deliverables. So your language is going to change, but it's based on context and it's based on who's in front of you.
What advice would you give those, leaders, rising leaders who because of that background or because of their belief system, really struggle with, we talked a lot about like speaking up in the meeting, advocating your ideas, but I want to give a little more time to advocating for yourself, like you were just talking about, like in a performance review setting or even online or wherever. Like what kind of strategies do we have to break through there?
I think thinking of it as a dial helps, right? Like knowing who's in front of you, what context you're in. And then just like we have to turn up the I or turn up the we, I think you and I have talked about this, but I really feel like every person in every organization has to be a part of a team and apart from the team. So when you're a part of a team, that's the we. And when you're apart from them, that's the I. And so here you are, you're figuring out your day. And if you're a leader, you need to have aspects of both, right? Because you're still responsible. You're responsible for the team's success, but you're also responsible for your success too. So in your day, like let's put performance review to the side, just your daily task. Like you don't want to have so much task in a part of, you want to have apart from as well, because you're still being measured on your leadership, right? And so we want to start thinking about it, not just from the performance review, those 2 or 3 times a year. It's like on a daily basis as well. How are we making sure we're a part of a team and apart from the team?
I love that because I'm such a advocate. I mean, if I had to wrap what I at least hope my sort of like brand or message is around is the self-leadership guy, right? And so firm believer that you can't effectively lead others better than you lead yourself. And for so many people, and usually well-intentioned people, service-minded people, leaders, right? It's all about this identity of giving and serving and, putting things out for putting other people before you and your team and your selfless and all those things. But, to your point, if what you're telling yourself is like, the more you do that, the more I think subconsciously you're running the neural pathways of you're not worth the time.
Yes, I agree 100%. I think, there's so many schools of thought, like what you're describing as servant leadership. If we think of like all the different frameworks of servant leadership where it's all about everyone else. And it's like, well, you're still being measured on your leadership capabilities. And so you are going to be measured on yourself and the success of the team. I think if we think of it that way, it helps us feel less boastful or less like, oh, I don't want to do this. I'm tooting my own horn. It's like, no, you actually have to toot your own horn and you have to toot your team's horn too, as a leader. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And you mentioned, putting that time into yourself where you're advocating for yourself and then putting in time for, I think advocating for your own development is something that a lot of leaders don't do. That's so critical I'm having a conversation with my wife right now around how much development she's getting at work and how, this for high performers, for people that want to do well, for like they value, and that the data shows us, it's like they value growth and development more than even compensation. Like they want to be poured into, and you want to do that to yourself. And so if you're not getting that, it's advocating. In her case, I'm like, you need to advocate to get like an outside coach, like get someone outside the organization so they can pour into you.
Yeah, I think, we can't know everything all the time in every situation. And so knowing that there's a gap, again, awareness, it's like, hey, I could actually level up on X skill. So how do I advocate for myself to get the budget, to get the continuing ed stipend, to get the coach, to get the whatever it is you need? But it all stems from like us moving away from this autopilot place that many people have gotten into, where it's like, okay, I'm going to work, I'm at my desk, I'm doing my work. And it's like, it's like very robotic. And I think awareness is what is missing in a lot of these instances.
Well, amazing segue, Neelu, because when we talk about, becoming how human, we don't want to be a cog in a wheel. We want to feel like a human being and be fired up at work and be creative and do the things that give us energy. One of the things as work is changing, obviously, is AI in general, technology. So how is AI changing the way we show up and advocate for ourselves at work?
Well, one of the things AI can do is AI could give you talking points. Like if you're struggling, if you put in like, hey, I did all of these things and you put your resume in or your bullet points, like AI will give you some talking points. But if you're not comfortable advocating for yourself, talking points, you're just reading off of a sheet. So it doesn't really matter, right? Like when AI is not going to go into your performance review conversation and advocate for you. Those are skills that you still need to have. So I think there's a fine line between using AI to sort of like enhance what you're thinking. You still have to put your thoughts in. You can't just sort of expect it to give you back what you need. And I think a lot of us have gotten to a point where we are not, maybe we haven't, we're getting there where it's just, okay, just look on ChatGPT or look on AI and put your session description in and make it better. And it's like, but is it your voice? And I know I have a lot of people I've been speaking to who are like, well, I'm training it to sound like me and I'm putting in all these documents so it knows me. And I hesitate to believe that fully. I think that there's still some processing, some human development that AI will never be able to do.
Well, I love that because I pulled from one of your pieces of content, a quote you have that AI will do the tasks, but only humans create meaning.
Right. Exactly. Even if AI can be trained to be empathic and emotionally intelligent, it's never going to be able to read the room.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, maybe we're getting to a place where robots will be able to read the room, but I think there's just something that AI cannot do, and it's really like the interpretation through your lens. Only you can look through your own eyes and have that awareness. I don't think there's any robot or any machinery that can do that.
I love that. It's a great example. What are there any other ways, or what's your take? Because I believe that's true. And I believe there's more. Like, what are other skills or traits you think that will make human leaders irreplaceable, even in an AI-powered future?
Well, getting out of that robot, right? Like that robotic automatic place that many of us reside in. It's like, you're not going to come up with those creative ideas if you don't give yourself some pauses, if you don't put the device down, if you don't take a walk, if you don't actually sort of stir that creative fire that's within you, nothing's going to come out. So then you're just going to resort to AI. You're going to say, well, it'll do it quicker. It'll do it faster. And again, it comes to speed, right? And it's like, wait, give yourself processing time, take a walk, go do something else that lights you up and brings out that creative wellspring that we all have inside of us. And I think when we rely too heavily, it's like if it becomes a crutch every time you're stuck, then that's just going to be a habit that you go to.
Right. So the more we're relying on AI to do that creative thinking and thought, we're losing the mental reps for ourselves and our own capacity to do that. So we're actually lowering our capacity for creative and innovative thought by over relying on AI.
Yeah, it's like any medication. Ultimately, you become the effect of it changes, right? Or it doesn't have the same effect as if you're on a medication. So you then end up changing medication, you end up increasing the dose. You have to do something different. If you keep doing what you're doing, your body's going to adjust. So same thing with AI. It's like if that's just going to be your crutch and your go-to, then you're going to lose the ability for your body, your mind to sort of think on its own.
I also think there's a second, it just came up for me right now, was I'm thinking of this secondary effect of thinking that, you as an individual interacting or coming with trying to use, AI for, it can be good for things like idea generation and, throwing different things you have and getting feedback and that sort of thing. But sort of thinking that is going to replace sort of the magic that happens by getting 8 creative people in a room bouncing ideas off each other, right? That's such a unique, those are 2 very different processes.
Absolutely.
That's a very good point. And I think one that leaders, we need to really consider, not over-reliance on that. And another, as we talk about leaders and for ourselves inside organizations and being more human, another concept you have is about the impact on others of leaders or people stepping up and advocating for themselves and how it kind of assists other people. You call it the Lighthouse Effect. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So if you think about it, when we say self-advocacy, it sounds like it's a selfish act, right? But what's actually happening is as you are advocating for yourself, so you're getting those promotions, you're getting those raises, you work in a large organization, there are so many people behind you that look like you, and you're inspiring them to also advocate for themselves. So it is actually, I believe, self-advocacy is the most collective, generous act you can do. You're leaving a trail behind you. And then the lighthouse is really you may think you're just going in one direction, but there's so many people, maybe they're not even linearly behind you. Maybe they're in the peripheral and they see you and they're not even in your company, but they read articles that you put out or they read your thought leadership and you're inspiring them. And so I really think we think we're just impacting our family or we're impacting our friends around us, but we actually have such a larger, we are all lighthouses. And I think self-advocacy can be looked at in the same way. It is the most collective act you can do.
Oh, yeah. I want to yell a preach in the back when you talk about that, because that's so good, right? Because It's interesting how I sort of think of leadership in the same vein of, again, we can't, leaders and individuals, we can't change. Only person we can change is ourselves. But when we lead ourselves better and we advocate for ourselves more, as we up level ourselves and how we show up, that is leadership. Now you're giving permission, or you're inspiring, you're empowering others to seek out the greatest version of themselves because they see you doing it. And I love how you called out, especially in spaces where maybe there aren't people who look like, sound like, have their backgrounds. Imagine what you can do there, and I think we see that with whatever, like pop culture icons or athletes or like other, we see it's almost like an other, like, well, yeah, but they all do it, but not realizing the impact that you can have, the power you have.
Absolutely. Like for you, it's like if you were let's say you worked in an organization and you were fighting hard for paternity leave. And it doesn't just impact you. Yes, hopefully you will get the paternity leave, but you might be changing policy. You might be inspiring other dads on your team who need paternity leave. So it's just like, it's never just about us. It's never just about us. It's always about, when you're fighting for what you believe in, there's so many other people that benefit.
So what's one question that, when a leader is listening to this right now, like, what's a question they should be asking themselves to reflect on everything you've been talking about?
Am I a good self-advocate? Or what does self-advocacy look like for me? Because I think the first one's a closed-ended question. So the second is what does self-advocacy look like for me?
Yeah. I love that it always coming back to, how am I showing up and how am I leading by example? I think that's so great. So, man, Neelu, is there anything in this space that you think is important for our listeners to hear from you that we haven't touched on yet?
No, I think that piece about, you may think you're I have a perfect example of this, actually. I was at the supermarket the other day and there was a huge line and someone cut this person and the person turned around and said, "I'm sorry, sir, I was here first." And by her doing that, he tried to do that again to other women in the back, and other women were like, "I'm sorry, sir, I was here first." And it's like, it was like a dumb, and they used the exact same language. And I was like, that is self-advocacy. That woman stood up for herself, and then she inspired all of the other women online that guy was trying to get ahead of. And I don't mean to make it about gender, but what I'm saying is her phrase, all of them started using, because it was a huge line. It was before the storm and people go crazy when there's like, people can't get to the supermarket, can't get to food. So it was just so interesting to me because everyone used the exact same phrase. So in that moment, she probably wasn't thinking, oh, I'm going to help out all of these other people online. I'm only doing this for myself. But in fact, she helped so many other people online.
We never know the impact that we're having by putting effort into showing up as our best selves or continue to become our best selves. I just think that's true across the board. And it's something we, like you point, we go so fast, we run through life about accomplishments and the checklists and everything else. And we're not realizing that, and maybe on both sides of it, like how we're showing up for ourselves and how we're demonstrating, and showing up in the world is having, this ripple effect. Since we're mentioned the paternity thing, and I'm a new dad, we talked about parenting. And so now, of course, my whole algorithm is like, how to deal with toddlers, basically. That's on my Instagram. My Instagram's like leadership, jujitsu, and toddlers. That's my life. And there was a study that children won't treat themselves the way you treat them. They'll treat themselves the way that you treated yourself in front of them.
Oh, I love that. Like, how powerful is that?
So when you talk about self-advocacy, when you advocate for yourself, it's, as you mentioned, such a selfless act. And so this is such important work. And, obviously your book is out. It's everywhere. It's awesome. Be Your Own Cheerleader. But people are interested in, like, I need more of this. I need more Neelu for myself and my organization. Where do they go?
Well, I'm very active on LinkedIn. So you can find me on LinkedIn under Neelu Kaur. And I'm also my website, neelukaur.com. But you're right. You can find Be Your Own Cheerleader anywhere. You can find books. So I think it's a memorable enough title that you will, even if you don't remember Kaur, you'll remember something.
Yeah. You'll remember Be Your Own Cheerleader.
Yeah.
For sure. For sure. Well, Neelu, this has been awesome. I'm glad we got to do this. And I think it was such a powerful concept and episode. And again, I just want to compliment the work you're putting out into the world.
Thank you so much. This was a pleasure.
All right. Until next time.
All right.
Thanks for being a part of the No Limit Leadership family. This isn't just a podcast. We're building a movement of no limit leaders driven to unlock our greatness and lead the world forward. If this made you think or gave you something useful, please, 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 right now, go hit follow and then share it with one leader you believe in. Challenge limits, develop leaders, fuel greatness.